Hey guys, welcome to the Community Frontline Weekly Update this week. This is our second round, so if you want to go back and revisit last week's, we had an update from the police department and then an update that came from like kind of a housing authority. And would love to have kind of y'all like watching these as we go through these next couple weeks. We're excited to just be a part of kind of responding to the needs of the community during this time, and we hope to be just a true kind of reference and resource point, and also a way to just keep folks connected to one another, as I think that's just as valuable as anything else that we can offer the community right now. So we'll have a couple updates on various ways that we're doing that through Community Frontline directly. But first, I want to introduce Joel Sneed, who is a LPCI, and will be providing us with kind of just some various resources and tips and tricks to kind of work through this time as we address the mental health side of things.
Hi guys, thank you all for being here tonight, and I just wanted to let you know before I get started, if you look down at the bottom, there's a little Q&A button that you can click, and I'm going to have this Q&A screen open so that you can be asking questions in real time as I'm kind of going through this. And so I just want to let you know that you can feel free to stop me anytime throughout this presentation and ask any types of questions, and I would be glad to answer as much as I can. So I've got 5 things that I'm going to talk about tonight, and these are just 5 things. So as an LPCI, I'm seeing clients day in and day out. And this has been a pretty big transition for people with having to be quarantined. We've gotten out of our normal routines and off of our normal schedules. We're not able to see the people that we are used to seeing on a regular basis. And so these are 5 things that have kind of stood out to me as I've been working with clients that seem to be some good things that we can try and implement during this time to try and help us be in a good mental and emotional space. And not end up going into depression, dealing with lots of anxiety, lots of other things that can easily begin to happen as we're sort of stuck at home and in this weird transition phase of kind of the new normal right now. So the first thing that I would encourage you to do would be to create a schedule. With us getting out of our normal routine and being out of a normal schedule, it can feel a lot like everything's just kind of mixing together, and kind of like the days are melting together, and we kind of just feel like Groundhog Day sometimes, where it's just wake up and do the same thing over and over and over again, and it can take a toll on our mind. And so one of the things that I've been encouraging people to do is to sit down either by yourself or with your spouse or whoever you're living with, and create a schedule. So that would look like sitting down and kind of looking at the week, and what does it look like to have kind of a framework for what the week should look like for you and your family, and then also breaking it down by day. And so some people like to have a really rigid, detailed schedule where they want to know exactly what they're doing every 15 minutes or every hour. For someone like me, I'm much more organic, and that type of structure stresses me out. So the way that we've kind of been doing our schedules is we'll set it up with maybe 2 or 3 hour windows and figure out a few things that we want to try and get done within those windows of time, so that we're able to still be doing things and accomplishing things throughout the day and not feel like we're or not go into the temptation of sitting down and watching Netflix all day. With a routine and with a schedule, it gives us several things. It gives us a sense of safety and security, and it also gives us a sense of control in the midst of this time where everything feels out of control. Even just knowing when this thing is going to end, we really don't know. And so everything kind of feels out of control. And so this can kind of give us some semblance of control, and it can give us a little bit of, and give us some semblance of normalcy again. And then in regards to scheduling, one other small thing I would encourage you to do is maybe Create just a short to-do list before you go to bed each night for the next day. It gives you something. It gives you something to shoot for. It allows you to go to bed and wake up the next morning kind of having an idea of what you need to do and what direction you need to be going once your feet hit the ground and you get out of bed. So the second thing I want to address is working from home. So not everybody's working from home, but a lot of us are. And one of the difficult things with working from home is that whenever you leave and get to go to work somewhere and you get in your car and you drive, you kind of have that time on your drive from home to work to kind of get yourself mentally and emotionally prepared for the day. And then when you're coming home from work on the drive, it gives you that time to kind of decompress from the day of work and then get home and do whatever you've got to do at the house. And it also gives you a degree of separation, so it doesn't feel like work and home are being mixed together. But whenever you're working from home, it's easy for us to think about work all the time and let it start to mix in with what's going on in our personal lives. It can be intrusive and it can get us in that mode where we feel like we're at work all the time. And it can begin to get us in a place where we start to feel depressed. And so a few things that I've been encouraging people to do with working from home is one, to if you don't have an office space already, set up a designated space where you're working. So some of you may have an extra room or an office that's already set up for this, and that is great. Some of you may not have an extra room, and you may be having your laptop open on the dinner table or something like that. And so what I would encourage you to do is even a small space can become a good workspace, but just enough space for you to set up your laptop and maybe spread a few things out and to keep it separated from other things that you're doing in day-to-day life. So if you're sitting down and working at your dinner table all day on your laptop, and then you close your laptop and you put it in your laptop bag, and then you sit down and you eat dinner at the same table you've been working at all day, it's much more difficult for you to separate having that time with your family or your alone time or whatever else from the time that you've been spending working that entire day. And so if you can create a designated space, that's one thing that's helpful, preferably a space that can be closed off. So if you're working a typical like 9 to 5 job, if you can create a space that can be closed off, then what you can do is close that space off after 5 o'clock so that you're not walking by and seeing your computer screen and your subconscious already starting to think about work, even though you're not intending to think about work. Or on a Saturday or Sunday when it's supposed to be your time to not be worrying about work, walking by and seeing that space and then subconsciously beginning to think through different issues that are going on at work or things that you need to do next week or whatever else. So I'm going to pause. I got a question up here I'm going to read real quick. How are you feeling with your time management and creating some structure with your time at home? Does anyone have any practical advice in addition to what Joel shared? Okay, so that's for everybody. Another thing that I want to share is to give yourself scheduled breaks throughout the day. So many of us have a hard time doing this, even just whenever everything was normal and when we were going to work somewhere else. I think it's pretty typical to work through lunch or eat lunch at our desk while we still work or whatever else. But I think it's important for our mentality and for our emotional state to really create those spaces where we kind of break up the day. And so I think to be able to, one, have a couple of breaks throughout the day, so maybe just 10 or 15-minute breaks here and there, but also a scheduled 30-minute or hour-long lunch break in the middle of the day can help to create that degree of separation to where it's something for you to look forward to. It gives you a little bit of time to kind of decompress and to think about some other things. Right now, with how nice the weather's been, some of the nice things to do during that time would be go sit outside in the backyard and just enjoy reading a book, or go sit down and watch a show that you've been wanting to catch up on, or play some video games, or go for a walk or walk the dogs or do something like that. Just something that kind of breaks up that day and helps you feel like you're still being able to get out and move and do something that brings some sense of normalcy. The other thing is to create a ritual whenever the work day is over. And so for me, whenever I'm at the office, I have a particular ritual that I do where I have different things that I have to submit into different areas at the office. And then I get all my things together and I gather them up and I put them in my work backpack. And then I zip my work backpack and I do the magnetic clips. And whenever I hear those things click, that tells me and it lets my brain know that work is over and it's time to go home. And this is that separation between work and personal life. And so I would encourage you to create some sort of routine or ritual at the house that starts to walk your brain through knowing that work is over for the day and now it's time for me to be with family or whoever else is there. This is important we know that it's important for kids to have a bedtime routine, for us to be able to have an evening and a morning routine. And so this is just another way for us to implement a tool like that helps our brain to understand that work is over and now it's time for me to move on to personal life. So the third thing is to continue to socialize and work hard to try and have some creative ways to socialize. So a couple of things that I've been exposed to and that I've heard of other people do. One, Zoom Hangouts. So that one's pretty simple. Everybody getting on Zoom and just kind of having some time together with friends or family. Another one that we've used and that we've tried to implement and trying to be consistent with, there's a website called jackbox.tv, and what it is it's a website that has a bunch of games, and it's different like trivia games and other stuff that you can purchase on there. And the way you play is you play with a group of people and each person logs in with a code on their phone and you answer questions and type in things and draw things and a bunch of fun stuff, and it will show up on the screen. And so what we've been doing is logging into that and then doing a screen share on Zoom with our friends who are playing. And so that way we can all kind of have that time together to hang out and to play games, laugh. And it's a little different than calling someone to catch up or doing something like that because you're just enjoying each other's company and being able to have a good time. It gives kind of that sense of normalcy. So I have a question. I'll go back to the working question here in a second. I'm gonna finish this the socializing piece. A couple other things that I've heard of people doing. I haven't actually done this one myself, but people getting out and just doing front yard hangouts. So taking your lawn chair out there, taking some drinks or some snacks or whatever, and everybody sitting 8 or 10 feet apart and just being able to be with other people, see their faces, be in the same space without actually putting yourself at risk. And then another one, getting out for walks, whether it's around the neighborhood or the trails. There's lots of different trails around Fort Worth. The Trinity Trails is one of my favorite places to go. You'll see people out riding bikes, walking their dogs, running, whatever. And one thing that we take for granted, and I don't think that we realize has had an effect on us, is that in our day-to-day life, we are used to seeing strangers. We are used to seeing lots of different faces and body sizes and shapes and skin colors and styles and hair and lots of different things. And we have essentially not been exposed to any of that by having to be quarantined. And so if we can go put ourselves in a public space where we can still have a safe distance from one another, it allows us to start to have that a little bit for our brain to get that variety that we've become so used to, but to also be able to be safe and be at a safe distance from one another. So let's go back to this question real quick, and then I'll move on to the next point. So what are good ways to deal with working and parenting at the same time? It's a great question. And I think one of the biggest things, there's two big things that I would say. One is that most of you are working and you're not teachers. So give yourself some grace. That's the kids being at home and you being at home and trying to work. You're not expected to be a full-time teacher who is going to teach them as if they were sitting in a classroom all day, every day. For us to expect that of ourselves is setting ourselves up for failure. So I want to encourage you to give yourself grace and not expect that of yourself. But then I would also point you back to the scheduling piece. And I think that that's one way where we can try and figure that out. So if we're trying to work from home and we have some flexibility in the hours that we work, then maybe we work that into the schedule where 1 hour in the morning is for us to be with the kids and do a little teaching and then get them set up with some work. And then we go in and we start doing our own work for an hour. And then maybe after lunchtime, we get to go back and do a little bit more teaching, and then go back and do the rest of what we've got to do once we get the kids rolling on the next thing that they're doing and have them working. So that's one suggestion. There's probably 1,000 different solutions to this question. But I think the big thing is really just trying to be creative with the way that you're scheduling your day and trying to figure out what are good ways with the rhythm that you have as a family to be able to work those in. Not that you have to be teaching 8 hours a day, but to be able to piece it in here and there so that you're still able to have them doing some of the work that they're doing. And then also for you to be able to be available a little bit of the time to try and help them out with some of the things that may be a struggle, or maybe they just need some help on. The fourth thing I want to talk about is hobbies. Talked to a lot of people, and I've heard the same comment many times that as we talk about hobbies, they're surprised that their only hobby was going out to eat at a restaurant with friends, and now we can't do that. So I would encourage everybody to try and find something that you can do that focuses your brain. You have to spend time doing it, and I would encourage it to be something that is away from any type of technology or screen. It's easier for us to run to Netflix or video games or other things like that, but to be able to get into something where we can use our hands and use our brains a little bit, and something that we enjoy. And that could be one of a million things. I always encourage people to think about what's a hobby that you used to have, or something you used to enjoy as a kid, or what's something that you've always kind of thought that's something that's kind of piqued your interest and like, man, that'd be kind of cool to get into. And so maybe that's learn an instrument. For me, it's been getting out in the backyard and doing a bunch of projects around the backyard and trying to get it set up to host events once we can see people again and have people over for us to have parties and hang out. It could be lots of different things, but I think the big thing is being away from screens, and having something that you can enjoy and look forward to doing on a regular basis, that has your brain focusing on something different. It breaks up the monotony of the day, and just gives you another thing to do to try and help get you in a good headspace. The last thing I would say on the 5 things, and then I have a few bonus things that I'll just throw out there, is I call this one healthy habits. So the first one with this, I think, is being very diligent to limit the amount of news that you consume. It's really easy for us to be checking Twitter every 5 seconds, or to be jumping on Facebook and looking at updates, or YouTube, or even just to have the news on in the back, and kind of just have that scrolling. So limiting that for me, this is what this looked like, and I think it can look different for everybody, but I would encourage to give yourself kind of a time limit on how much news you're going to watch or consume that day. And so for me, the way it started out was I would listen to the presidential address each day, and then I would listen to Betsy Price's address each day. And I found out that even with that, I was still consuming too much. And so I've cut it back to where I'm basically just catching up with Betsy Price's address so that I know what's happening locally. I know what's happening with me and kind of what I can do with my business. And then also for us as a family, what everything needs to look like and how we need to move forward. So maybe that looks like just checking Twitter for 15 minutes in the evening, or just watching one news channel for 30 minutes or whatever. Like I said, it could look different for everybody, but I think the important thing is to just begin to set those boundaries and set those limits so that we're not just consuming news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm going to pause. I have a couple questions I want to look at real quick. The question is, how would you suggest a high school senior deal with this situation mentally? Yeah, so with a high school senior, I think for one thing, a lot of the things that we've talked about are good and going to be helpful, but I'm going to make an assumption in this question. It's not said, but I would assume because for one, senior year, not being able to be around friends and have that social life that everybody's used to and that everybody looks forward to, not being able to participate in some of the things that seniors look forward to with school and everything. And then graduation being a massive one. So I think for one, being able to talk about it, be open, and work through some of those things, whether it's with parents, siblings, friends, whoever, someone that kind of understands and is able to empathize with this person. I would also encourage them, if this is taking a really heavy mental toll, if you're noticing some depression or anything like that, I would encourage them to see a counselor and talk to them, because with this situation, so typically we think of grieving whenever someone that we love passes away, but I would say that grief is whenever we experience loss. And so I think it's probably important for this person to grieve because they're essentially losing this year of high school, and this is the biggest year of high school, and this is something that everybody kind of looks forward to and is excited about. And so I would encourage them to grieve, and if they feel like they can do that in a healthy way on their own or with friends or family, then I think that's great. Or if they feel like they need some professional help to kind of help them walk through that grief, then I definitely encourage you to kind of seek that out for them. So I have another question. What do you recommend for those dealing with layoffs as the person being laid off, or the small business stressing from laying off individuals? Okay, yeah, good question. Dealing with the layoffs. So for the people, let me flip this real quick. The businesses stressing from laying off individuals. I would say one, the way that I understand it is that by laying off individuals, if you're not able to pay them, then you are allowing them the opportunity to apply for unemployment and to potentially be able to bring in some sort of income, even though it's probably not going to be as much as they were making working, but allowing them the opportunity to try and bring in some sort of income, whereas they would be bringing in no income if you tried to keep them on but were not able to pay them as a business. So I would encourage you as the business owner to give yourself grace in this situation, because this is something that nobody was prepared for, hence the reason that everything seems so chaotic right now. And so the layoffs are not happening because you don't like people and you don't want people to be able to work and to be able to pay them. We're in a situation that is unprecedented right now. And so I would encourage you to give yourself grace, and that laying people off right now may be you doing the best thing you can for them, to give them at least some opportunity to potentially bring in some sort of income. And I know it sounds and kind of seems backwards, but that's kind of the way that I've been looking at it. I'm not a business who's laying people off, but as I've kind of been looking at the situation, that's how I've been kind of reframing it to see it in a healthy way. And then for the people who have been laid off, I would go back to the idea of grief and allowing yourself to grieve. And then I would also encourage you to be around people who are encouraging you and building you up, and knowing that this is not going to last forever. And so one of the things we talk about with mental health is people sometimes will have a plan of action, and they'll be moving forward with a plan of action. And we kind of liken this to like being outside and tending to a garden and doing some beautification to your house. But then a storm will come through. And so they'll hit this season where it's really difficult mentally or emotionally or spiritually or relationally or whatever. And we talk about in the midst of storms, what you do is you board up your windows and you hunker down and you survive. And you don't worry about the flowers that you planted last week, and you don't worry about the new things that you just did to beautify your house. That's a lot of that is probably going to be destroyed in the storm. But when the storm's over, after we've survived, we go back out and we start working on that stuff again. And right now we're in the midst of that storm. And so I think the important thing is to board up the windows and to get in the house and to be able to survive, to push through and make it through this season. And so there is grief that needs to happen. I'm sure that there's a lot of fear and anxiety with people who have been laid off, as far as like, how am I going to make it financially, and how am I going to eat? And there's lots of other things. And so that's where I would also say, one, I think, so with Community Frontline, one of the things that we're trying to do is help people who are in certain situations financially. So we have a form that you can fill out if you're one of those people who need help with certain things like that. If it's something where it's mental or emotional struggle that you're going through and you need help, that's where I would say it's important to probably get some help from a counselor. And probably more important right now than it's ever been, to be able to seek help and to reach out to someone to be able to kind of walk through you with this stuff that's going on. I have one more question I'm going to read, and then I'll move on this. Do you have a list of resources or a way to contact counselors? So I do not have a list of resources, but I do have several counselors that I would recommend or refer people to. And so once we get to the end, I'll put a list of different counselors that I would recommend or refer people to. And then I don't have it with me, but I can get my hands on some resources for some free or reduced price counseling around Fort Worth as well. And so I'll get my hands on that, and then see if we can attach that to the link to this or something, to where you guys can get access to that. So, all right, so back to healthy habits. So the first one was to limit your news consumption. Let's run through these real quick. There's a few things that are kind of staples to mental health. And so I'm going to kind of give some resources for these, because unless you've worked with a counselor or have been exposed to this stuff, you probably don't know how to do this or haven't. And so I'll give a list of resources for this to kind of help you be exposed to this. But meditation is one of the biggest things that I encourage people to do. I do this myself regularly, and I encourage all of my clients to do this. This is a really good way for us to get in a good headspace, and be able to kind of step back and not let our emotions control what we're doing, but be able to step back and decide what kind of thought trains we're going to jump on, and decide how we're going to respond to certain situations. So a couple of apps that I would encourage you to use to learn how to meditate and to get exposed to it. The first one's called Headspace. It's one word. And they have a free 10-day mindfulness meditation training on there. And this one's really good. This is the one that I use. There's another one called 10% Happier. And I believe that this one has a 7-day free training. It's the same type of meditation. It just has kind of a different feel. And then there's another one called Insight Timer. And Insight Timer has a bunch of guided meditations that are free. And then it also has a bunch that are content specific. And so like if you deal with fear, there's a meditation on there called I Am Safe. And so there's lots of different meditations like that on there that you can utilize, and a lot of those are free. There are some paid ones on there too, but a lot of those are free. Second thing I would encourage people to do is use breathing techniques. Breathing techniques are super helpful. I won't geek out too much on the brain science behind this, but they're super helpful, especially whenever you're feeling anxious, because whenever you're feeling anxious, you tend to go into fight, flight, or freeze. When we go into fight, flight, or freeze, our nervous system takes over and kind of hijacks our brain. And so the prefrontal cortex, which is where rational thought is housed, it's right here in the front part of our brain. It goes offline and our limbic system takes over. And our limbic system is all about survival. And so it made a lot of sense back when we were running from saber-toothed tigers, that we didn't really need to stop and rationalize why the saber-toothed tiger would want to eat us. We just needed to get away from it. And so fight, flight, or freeze was really useful back then, but it tends to be a little bit more detrimental for us now, because the times where we don't feel safe tend to be in the midst of conflict, like emotional conflict and things like that. And so the reason we use breathing is because if we can control the cadence of our breathing, our heart rate will begin to mirror the cadence of our breath, and it will send a message to our brain telling our brain that we're safe, which will pull our brain out of fight, flight, or freeze, and our prefrontal cortex will come back online so that we can think rationally. So there's a lot of science behind breathing techniques, and it's really useful. So this is something that I teach my clients in session. I don't have time to teach on this video, so a couple things, a couple resources I would tell you to go to. One is called Breathe to Relax. It's an app that teaches you how to use breathing techniques. The word breathe, the number 2, and then the word relax, and it's all kind of meshed together in one word. And then calm, just the word calm. That also has a lot of different resources. It's got meditation stuff, it's got breathing stuff, and it also has like nighttime noises, sleep sounds, things like that that you can utilize. Sleep is really big for mental health. For those of you who have gotten off of your normal schedule, you may be struggling also with getting enough sleep or being in a good sleep routine. And so a couple things that are important with getting good sleep is being off of screens at least 2 hours before you go to bed. One of the big things with screens is you don't want to be exposed to blue light. It tricks your circadian rhythm to where even if the sun is down and it's dark outside, if you're exposing yourself to blue light, you're tricking your brain into thinking that it's still daytime. And so it has a pretty profound effect on your circadian rhythm, which can get your sleep all out of whack. So I would say no screens, at least 2 hours before bed. You want your bedroom to be a cold, dark space. That's where our bodies get the best rest. So if you have a lot of light coming into your room, if you sleep with it hot and you're waking up sweaty, I would encourage you to try and make some changes with that. And you want it to be a quiet space, or you want it to be peaceful sounds. So that's where Calm could come in. You could use these sleep sounds with the Calm app, or if you have a sound machine. I know a lot of people like to use like the white noise machines or something like that. That is also helpful with being able to get some good sleep. We could go into a lot more with sleep, but those are some of the big things I just wanted to touch on. And then journaling. So journaling is kind of a staple to mental health. There's several different types of journaling. I'll tell you about a few. One, there is what we call a gratitude journal. This is something that I use regularly, and I encourage most of my clients to use this. With a gratitude journal, you're basically just writing down 3 things that you're grateful for every day. And some people like to write it out with a bunch of sentences or a paragraph. I don't do all that. I literally write like 1 word or a sentence for each of the 3 things. And what this begins to do is it starts to change your subconscious to view the world in a more optimistic way rather than a pessimistic way. And so for those of you who are dealing with depression or kind of going into depression because of what we're going through, I would encourage you to implement this tool to wake up and kind of do this first thing before you get the day started. Moving into the day, being grateful and seeing all the things that you have to be grateful for. Another type of journaling would be just writing about your hopes and dreams. And so sitting down and just, I guess you could maybe call it like a vision journal. But one of the things that I love doing, I know that maybe not everybody loves this, but I know a lot of people do, is to sit down and just kind of dream about the future, envision things that they want to achieve and accomplish and things that they want to move towards. And so a vision journal is a really cool way to sit down and sort of daydream and think about things and be able to write those things down. And then for those of you who are religious or Christians or anything like that, I would say journaling along with scripture. That's also a good way to kind of reground you, bring you back to just kind of setting your mind right, having some hope, and being able to really journal through that stuff. Maybe journaling about your fears and anxieties to the Lord and using that as like a prayer journal or something like that. So that's another option with journaling. Bonus things that I would say that we could spend a lot more time on, but I'm just going to throw them in here because I think I'm over time. But one, just to get out and go for a drive, I think is super helpful. Get out, go drive around. One of the things that that I like to do that's helpful for me is I'll go drive around different neighborhoods in Fort Worth where I hope to buy a house one day. And so I'll look at all these beautiful houses that I think are cool or look awesome, or I like the architecture or whatever, and just kind of drive around. And it goes along too with sort of the dream or the vision journal, where it's like kind of driving around different places and envisioning things and dreaming and setting goals and things like that. Also, I think it's important to treat yourself. So one of the things that we've done is we're trying to think of like one of our favorite meals or one of our favorite restaurants, and we'll order from that restaurant, try to order from one of those restaurants once a week, and we'll go pick that up and we'll sit down and have a good meal together as a family, something that we can kind of look forward to and enjoy. Maybe we'll get some dessert along with dinner, whatever it may be, but just something to kind of, again, break up the monotony and something to kind of be looking forward to and enjoy. And then this could also go under healthy habits and could be a whole nother discussion in and of itself, but exercise, get your body moving. It's difficult to be motivated to exercise when things are normal. I feel like it's probably been much more difficult to be motivated to exercise for some of us now that we're quarantined and stuck at home. But I would encourage you to find some sort of way to get out and move your body. So maybe that for you just looks like getting out and walking. Maybe it looks like getting out and shooting some baskets, or jump rope, or jumping on the trampoline. It could look like a bunch of different things. It doesn't have to look like being at a gym for an hour a day and doing a set routine, but just getting out and moving your body a little bit. Whenever we're sitting with us sitting all the time, it can also lead us into a depressive state. And it makes it a lot more difficult to be motivated to accomplish things. And so we've got to be intentional to get up and to move our body and to try and do different things that are helping us to stay motivated to move and to accomplish things, and try and achieve some sense of normalcy throughout in the midst of this difficult time. So that's all I have, guys. If you have any more questions that you want to put up there, I would be glad to answer. Thanks for everybody who put a question up.
Dante's taking care of my mute for me. Thanks so much, Joel, for all the insights that you shared there. I did try to put a few responses to some of those comments as they were coming up as well. So I want to let y'all know just specifically my email through Community Frontline is btravis@communityfrontline.com. And if anyone has any like questions that weren't answered or specific feedback or resources they would like, you can email me there. And those resources that Joel mentioned, that way we can kind of make sure we just get them directly to you. I'm happy to send those out. But then also there will be those resources posted alongside with the final post that goes up on Facebook. And then some of those resources were linked there in the comments as well. So y'all should see that. Real quick, I just want to give just a huge like clap of appreciation for Joel. I wish we could like virtually clap for you or something. But thanks so much for putting the time into preparing for this. And I know for sure there's a couple notes I took that were just very practical, specific resources or tools I can use to kind of try to stave off some of the crazy that comes alongside with this. So thank you again, Joel. I want to make sure and mention that Community Frontline has been kind of working to figure out what our practical response will be to the community during this time. And a lot of that right now is housed at a website that's like, it's a donor page, but we've also put the information in there for where you can access kind of resources. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick just to show y'all what that looks like. So this is the page. We're directing everyone to this because we can update it real easily as opposed to like a website. So we've got our make a request and volunteer sign up. Those are the two main buttons I want to show you. If you click here on make a request, it will allow you as an individual to either request to have needs met that you may have, such as grocery delivery or provision of food or other specific like cleaning supplies and things like that, or like actual tasks around the house. So like if you needed, obviously we're going to maintain physical distancing, but if you needed your yard mowed or you needed something moved or taken care of, there's a group of young people that are eager and willing, along with us from Community Frontline, eager and willing to serve the community during this time and are trying to find ways to do that. So if you personally need that or you know anyone that needs that, we made the form as simple as possible. The only thing you really have to do is your name and phone number here. And beyond that, it's kind of just the more information you provide, the better, but you will be contacted before anything is done. So we'll call you to kind of figure out what exactly it is that you're needing and how we can best support you. And our goal is to build an actual relationship there so that you won't just be it won't be like a one-off thing. We do want to kind of follow up and keep up with any needs that you have as the kind of the timeline on this continues to drag out. And then I want to also show that here you can sign up as a volunteer for that service. So if you're interested in kind of finding a way to serve but aren't sure how to do that, this is a great way to kind of step into that. And it's got some great leadership right now that's kind of helping keep that organized and flowing. So those are the two big things there. And then the last thing I want to mention is with these weekly updates, we are trying to hit a specific kind of area each week. So like I said, last week we had a kind of review of the police practices during this time, as well as some housing kind of response to different like mortgage and utilities needs that you may have. This week we had a mental health update from Joel. And next week we will have the superintendent, Dr. Kent Scribner from Fort Worth ISD on with Quentin Phillips, school board representative, to kind of give a good educational update. And I know that they would love to have some questions from the community as they kind of talk through sort of the things that they bring to the table, but also really getting to hear, as an educator myself, I've seen how important it is to have that parent kind of perspective and insight into all the different plans and practices that we're putting into place right now. So that's kind of the gist from Community Frontline. I don't know if we've got nothing else in the questions or comment section, then I feel like we have kind of wrapped it up and are ready to call it a night. Thanks so much, Ann.